outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services, yeah.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Hi, I'm Claudette, radiographer at the radiology departments at the community hospital. We offer high-quality service with state-of-the-art equipment in X-ray, ultrasound, CT, and mammogram. Come, our friendly staff awaits you.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
Where good private health care is affordable.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
This holiday season, bring the magic of Christmas home with WESN's Joy of Christmas. Relive timeless classics from the laughter to the heartwarming moments that make the season unforgettable.
Hey, like the lamp, not the rat, like the lamp, not the rat!
Santa's coming to town! Santa! Oh my God!
Oh, good baby.
Experience the joy of WESN special productions, crafted to bring you new stories and cherished memories. This year, let WESN bring the joy of Christmas to your home.
Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown!
Catch the spirit, catch the joy.
Anchors away. May the force be with you.
Only on WESN, your content capital.
WESN.
We're back and better than ever here in studio, 38 Attica Street. Show Michael Small. This is talking about the WESN. I want to get that out of the way before I go into my soliloquy. Rant? Maybe not. Rant might be too strong of a word. But an observation. Something I want to give a little bit more consideration. And I was of two minds to do this until I noticed a very important detail. Well, a couple of details. First of all, I am hesitant to take what politicians say at face value anymore. So, of course, we had flooding last week, and it became a political issue, apparently. And now, you could potentially blame the people on the ground for making it a political issue. And to some extent, when is it right or wrong, rather, to bring up the politics that may or may not be affecting an issue? So, but with that said, the Minister of Works and Transport, he wanted the opposition to look at their own local government corporations with regards to their complaints, I guess you could say. Because he brought it a question where perhaps UNC health corporations may be, according to him, Some areas most affected are where the least action has been taken by corporations. We have written to these corporations several times requesting action, none has been taken. So to now issue such a call is misplaced. It is the corporation's job to serve notices. This is with regards to opposition members pointing out certain things about not being done, regulations not being done, maybe unregulated construction, let's put it that way, among other things, which it's not as though the opposition leader said anything new, gave us any incredible revelation that we have not necessarily thought before. But the opposition leader, she mentioned it. She mentioned what I thought to be low-hanging fruit. Therefore, I didn't necessarily mind her bringing politics into the moment, because it wasn't as though she said the PNM government purposefully did this to cause floods. No, she didn't say anything like that. She said these things happen. And the obvious response I would have thought would have been to say, yes, but those things probably happened during your administration as well when you were Prime Minister. Or to fire back and say, well, what did you do during the time of the partnership in order to rectify some of these situations? Because I would argue that they're ongoing and they are inherited by each administration, not caused by each administration. But that's not the track that the government took. The government minister basically said, some of your local government areas ain't up to scratch, so don't point fingers at us when 3 fingers pointed back at you. The problem is, I have reached the point where, particularly because the government has made so many claims about so many things that have not necessarily come to pass, that now that they make a claim, you see, what the opposition leader said, that's just what I think is collectively obvious. What the Works and Transport Minister is saying is specific and detailed enough that it's not something that, you know, the country didn't wake up and say, oh, flooding, yeah, we always have flooding because those UNC corporations don't do anything. Like, I don't know if people living there have that thought, and I would wonder, do PNM corporations and people living in PNM corporations have those thoughts? So this is not something that's part of the collective consensus or reasoning or ongoing theories. This is a specific claim. And with a specific claim like this, directed against a political opponent, the opposition leader was a little bit wiser. I don't know if she necessarily directly attributed anything to the PNM. But for Minister Sinanan to directly point his comments, I would need more than just your words, sir. You know? Because, let's be frank, you know, it's not as though your track record of Minister of Works and Transport has been exemplary up until this point. Maybe if a couple other ministers made a claim like this, I'll be more willing to accept it because they have that cachet. Whereas many of their cabinet colleagues don't necessarily do. I won't necessarily name their names because it's always a catch-22. You praise somebody and then you have to worry internally if that person will catch heat for making everybody else look bad. Yes, that has happened within the PNM already. There are some things that I know. But that's just the minister. The other thing is, I would caution the minister, before you want to point fingers to defend yourself, and maybe it's wrong because Ruan Sinanan, as a elected official, never struck me as someone with any significant capability in public speaking or public relations. In fact, one of the first things that I mentally know him for is a failure over public relations with regards to when the ferry service went down within the first year of the Keith Rowley administration, and there was a failure to properly communicate to the public that ended up causing the government to take an inherited problem and somehow accept all the blame for an issue they did not necessarily directly cause. But with that said, now we have an issue where people are watching their property being destroyed. as expected when floods reach a certain point. And they are in distress. And despite his lack of public relations skills, and maybe it's not obvious to him, in which case then both of them need someone to advise him. But Keaton brought this up on Friday. Minister of Local Government made a comment, and I believe it has been reported in subsequent follow-up articles on the Saturday edition of certain daily newspapers, that, well, it's not useful to exaggerate. All right, fair enough. Fair enough. The problem is, it's also not useful to kind of quibble over details when people are suffering, because the quibbling over details don't help the people that are suffering. And at first, I was willing to concede that to some extent the minister is right. You know, in the long run, we should not get the details wrong. Although the way how he the initial read of it was that, based on what I read, my impression was he was giving more accurate information, and it's fair. I just wish he did it a different way, because he comes off as defensive, and for the people who are actually on ground, who you're not just communicating to the rest of the country, you're also communicating, believe it or not, even if they're within UNC corporations, to the people within those corporations, because you are their Minister of Local Government, whether they like it or not. They might have voted UNC, they might have voted UNC for their local government representation. You're still the line minister, and to some extent, it behooves you to show leadership and compassion, which could only help your party's position. Even if you think, you know, it's not really going to make a difference in the national election for this constituency, even if you think that, still, it would help your party's position in the national election. But I guess that's maybe a lesson that most politicians, it's lost on. But then now, looking at the details of it, what's the quibble? Well, from what I understand, the chairman of the Penal Debe Regional Corporation apparently said 10,000 people were underwater, to which the minister, according to one daily newspaper reporting on his initial comments, saying, no, it wasn't thousands, it was 400 homes. Okay. Now, granted, 400 homes is not going to be tens of thousands, but to some extent, 400 homes are not 400 people. I mean, we're splitting hairs now. You could get a couple thousand people being the occupants of 400 homes. And this is assuming that the minister and the estimates of the ministry got it right. And to what extent are we going to say that the ministry's estimates are more accurate than the regional corporation's estimates? Who might have done a rough estimate given which areas were under floodwaters? And then you just essentially, what's the general population size of that area? And then now, the chairman, was he just referring to the area of his corporation or others? I'm not entirely sure, right? There's a lot of semantics here, which is why the Minister of Local Government should not have waded into these things and tried to split hairs. It's not 10,000, it's not tens of thousands of people, or it's not 10,000 people, but it's 400 homes. That's still, even if you just say only 4 people live in each home, in each household, that's still 1,600 people. And then things get dicier if you increase the scale. But then to some extent, is it only 400 homes? Why do it this way? You did not need to directly reference what the regional corporation chairman said. You could have just come out with a statement, let what he said settle, come out with a statement with your information, right? I'm not even debating who has the more accurate count. Just let it settle, come out with your information. By our estimate, 400 households with approximately however many people. Because I would think if you have an estimate on your households, you should at the very least also have an estimate on the number of people. So why are you debating apples versus oranges? Why not figure out a direct comparison? But you don't make the direct link. You let the people make the direct link. You just bring up the information objectively, stated matter-of-factly, as part of the ongoing process to try to treat with this situation. Because here's the reality. There's a photo of the opposition leader on the ground. I have yet to see, and maybe I'm wrong, but I have yet to see a photo of the Minister of Local Government or the Minister of Works and Transport on the ground, or the Prime Minister, or the acting Prime Minister, Minister of everything, or the Minister of Finance, or anybody from the Cabinet or the PNM side of the bench on the ground. Now you could say, well, their constituencies weren't flooded. That's not the point. The point is, optically, the people saw one side leader do something. It doesn't even have to be effective. And they did not necessarily, or they are not going to see the other side do something similar. What they're seeing is complaints. And that does not look good. It's about optics, yes, and that's usually an inconvenient, ugly truth. But you're in an election year. Optics also matters to leadership function. Perception also matters to the leadership function of your role as minister over this ministry, and as the minister, one of the line ministers, to deal with flooding with regards to works and transport, but also local government would qualify. You need to show more, as opposed to, instead of trying to be better than, undermine and blame, while your own performance, the people probably are not necessarily going to believe to be is up to scratch. They're not going to agree with you when you try to say we're doing all we can. They're not going to accept your job performance. Part of being government is not being government for the people who voted for you. It's also being government for the people who did not vote for you. Even if you don't win that constituency in the next general election, do you know how valuable it would be if people living in UNC-controlled areas, anecdotally, doesn't have to be a whole set of them, but if they had a word of thanks and praise to PNM ministers, man, you could play that on repeat throughout your election campaigning. But I guess that possibility on this issue has probably sailed. It's probably gone the way of the cuckoo bird. It's a minor thing at the end of the day. I myself am bringing up something that is not directly going to change the price of bread, but it is going to change the perception about why the price of bread is that high. Not directly, but indirectly. It's a funny thing, public perception. And maybe not a lot of people will see it like how I see it, but these little errors in communication and leadership adds up to where we are today, where trust and confidence in the system is not that high. All right. Let me pause for a cause here. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into the daily review. But stay tuned. This is Talking About WESN. Back in the studio, and we will be back with you after this.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Give us a call.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
Where good private health care is affordable.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
I'm back here and talking about the WSND Content Capital. Of course, the ASP should be joining me in a bit, but before that, we have today's Daily Review. It's back. No, not flooding. No, not power outages. Apparently, there was some load shedding. If we go to green energy without really thinking through, we're going to get more of that. No, we're not talking about the WASA rate increases. Yeah, we'll talk about the TTPS a little bit later, of course. No, we're talking about the proposed increases in the salaries of top public officials, including, but not limited to, the Prime Minister, Opposition Leader, ministers and MPs, etc., etc. Now, importance to the nation. And in a vacuum, this is somewhat important to the nation. One economist makes a good argument in a vacuum, pointing to the fact, I believe, that, look, to some extent, our officials are underpaid, including not just parliamentarians and ministers, but also senior public servants. Now, I will somewhat agree with, I'm not entirely sure even if he was trying to make this point, but based on what was said, this is economist Dr. Terence Farrell, but based on what he said, he was pointing to people, permanent secretaries and so on, particularly for the Ministry of Finance, I believe, among others, and saying that their salary is only $35,000 a month. And that is not good enough based on their responsibilities. And there's a lot of issues when you underpay people based on their responsibilities, right? One of the things is it's harder to ensure that they're not going to maybe do things they're not supposed to be doing, because the compensation is not worth the work that they're supposed to be doing. Also, there's the fact that if we want to demand good job performance, we do have to give reasonable remuneration for it, right? You know, we have to live up to our side of the bargain, so to speak. Although, of course, you know, it kind of has to be in parallel, so that's a bit tricky. Job performance has to be reasonable for wages to also be reasonable. But the current thing where both of them are low is not really tenable. So I get it. I get what he's trying to say. And the reason why I get it is because it's going to be rough to raise public servant wages if the Prime Minister's wage is too close to theirs. You can't have superiors making similar money to subordinates. Things will get impractical, uncomfortable, complicated. So if you want the leadership, well, the senior public servants to raise, to some extent you'll have to raise the leadership. That's just one argument, right? The problem is that does not account, yes, it might be good for the nation in a vacuum. It does not account for Trinidad and Tobago in 2024. It accounts for Trinidad and Tobago. It accounts for our current wage levels. It accounts for what would be reasonable for those office holders in a vacuum in our country based on our country's needs, but not necessarily based on our country's situation in 2024. So some other parliamentarians have already pointed out that this needs to be rejected, as happened when this came up in the past, which is why I'm kind of curious as to why this, I don't know, maybe to some extent a memo should have been given, hey, let's not talk about this right now. Let's not, no. Because at the end of the day, well, first, we have MP Dinesh Rambali, among others, right? One of the things is, please, he's asking people not to let this issue distract from more pressing long-term issues like crime. I guess you could say, you know, this is the lead story here, technically. Before was just my introduction, me pointing it out with more freestyle. But at the end of the day, I understand. This is an issue that needs to be addressed, though. But like other parliamentarians, including independent senators, they're pointing out to the obvious thing, that many in the public, but particularly those that have been offered these things, they're pointing out the fact that, look, you can't have so many people being limited to a 4% wage increase and then you go and give, I can't remember, but I think it was over 50% or 40% or whatever high rate of increase to certain senior public officials, right? Now, the Economist did point out that it's affordable to do so for people like the Prime Minister, for certain senior public officials, public servants, because you're talking 100 or so as opposed to 80,000. But again, that's practical outside of a vacuum. But this goes back to leadership function, because union leaders are taking note. Michael Anaset is one of them. And he's basically come out and said, well, give the working class a similar recommendation like the SRC, no? Because they're still talking, I believe port workers are still being told 2% retroactive wage increases for certain years, 2014 to 17, I think. And listen, I have no issue with the government's position with how it's negotiating with the various workers. My issue is when the union leaders look at this and they have to go back to their members, the dollars and cents might make sense, but it's a leadership function. Leaders should not make it a habit to ask their subordinates to do things they are not willing to do themselves. Even on the battlefield, you would say, well, the leaders lead from the front as a good way to get themselves killed. No, to some extent, all leaders, however, did have to, at one point in time, be the junior officer to go up in front and to take that risk. And then they have to have their subordinates pull them back as they got more and more higher up the ranks. Now, we're not talking that kind of risk here. We're talking about financial compensation of the nation, essentially. And this is a leadership function. You all have to take 4% for the good of the nation. Yes, the nation can't afford to give us more. And maybe there has to be a happy medium in order to allow for certain senior public servants, not elected officials, to get some pay increases as well. To what extent should that be more than 4%? That's one hell of an ethical debate. And I say ethical because, again, to ask people to subject themselves to circumstances, it's similar to, well, you know, crime is fine, because crime is fine in our areas. What is not fine in your area, but in my area, crime is fine. So it's reasonable for me to think that we don't need to do anything about crime. If the country has not enough money, you need to act in accordance to that. Yes, on a practical level, the country could afford a wage increase, but that does not fly. And in fact, I believe Dr. Sajiwan pointed out, in an election year, it's a slap in the face. It was a slap in the face last year, it's a slap in the face this year. So I don't necessarily, I understand if an economist or a financial consultant or some accountant or whatever wants to say, yes, on a practical level, this is fine. And I get it. But the reality of the nation now is that the public does not necessarily want to hear this and see this. We're all, because part of it is how many people are having a hard time affording groceries for their household. And they're looking up at the leaders. I mean, Dr. Farrell said it himself. If you want to reward meritocracy, you need to also be prepared to provide, if you want to demand meritocracy, you need to be willing to reward it as well. Fair enough. But just like we will look at the public sector and say, hey, some of these wage increases, we're not seeing the production for what you're demanding with regards to the financial side of it. Why not do these questions not come about with the government? Granted, the salary review commission is looking at the office, not the office holder. But to some extent right now, the office is being held by people. Do they warrant a wage increase? It's a bad message. It's a message that will not be seen by the people who will feel disrespected by it. It will not be feel or interpreted positively. I would hazard, I guess, that there's almost no way that it will be viewed positively by the working class, particularly by public servants, who's probably telling their union leaders right now, hey, let's strike this thing out, literally. And that's one of the things that Michael Anisette and other union leaders are considering. They're looking to take their dissatisfaction and take advantage, is one way to put it, of the upcoming general election. Now is the time. Now is the time. I have to wait and see how this really unfolds. To be fair to the government, it's not as though, at least on the surface, I don't know what is done behind the scenes, but from what we know of the process, it's not as though this is the PNM making these proposals. But I would have thought maybe last year when it came up, the government should have got together with the SRC as this is not a thing that we're going to do in the short term. So, you could make the recommendations, but just understand publicly, we're kind of be prepared for these things to just be shelved. And they should have communicated such immediately, right? Technically, they shouldn't necessarily control what the SRC puts out. I get it. But they should have immediately put it out there. We're not doing this. Just like last year, we're not doing this. But they didn't do that. It seems as though they want to wait and see, maybe. Some opposition MPs, some government MPs, they don't want to talk about it. Because next thing you know, it comes through. They don't want to necessarily go on the record to disagree with it up front. And part of being a leader is being willing to take a stand up front, not to wait and see how the winds blow. And then I'll take the more convenient path of the moment. Oh, it's acceptable for us to get the wage increase. Maybe the public might decide to not make this an issue and not talk about it. And they'll be like, all right, let's take our wage increase, because the winds blow in that direction. Or the winds might blow in the opposite direction. Public are up in arms and they're burning effigies of us. We need to, no, that's not leadership. That is a sign of followers. When people in our leadership positions act like followers, then exactly who is steering the ship? All right, I'll leave this topic alone. Let's move on to the next topic now. It's an interesting situation. Of course, the whole merit list fiasco, to some extent, part of the conclusion was a new police service commission that gave us the current police commissioner. And now 4 of those 5 members, 1 is being retained, the other 4 are set to be replaced with new candidates being up for nomination, and I believe it's going to be debated in Parliament. One of the things that's coming out of this transition is the outgoing head has put forward proposals to, I guess you could say, improve the Police Service Commission, because they are pointing out something with regards to the Service Commission not having enough powers and ability to really address the situation of selecting the Commissioner of Police, as well as the ongoing, I guess you could say, assessment of the job performance to determine whether you need to maintain or replace said person. Because, of course, there was a bit of a controversy when earlier Christopher was retained. Now, some of what the outgoing chairman says makes sense. Judith Jones is pointing to the fact that, outgoing chairman of the Service Commission is pointing to the fact that, look, one of the things is perhaps the Service Commission needs to be able to also have the authority to select or dismiss assistant commissioners of police. They do so for the commissioner and for the deputy commissioners, but not for the assistant commissioners. The reason why that is potentially important is if all you could look at is the commissioner and the deputy commissioners, then what's available for those positions will come from the assistant commissioners, and that'll be a limited talent pool to some extent, right? However, if they select the assistant commissioners, they are part of the process further down, as opposed to the commissioner being the head of the process for that. So being part of the process further down, I think it might be similar to the whole local government elections is what selects candidates for the general. Most of the population only really gets involved at the general and then complains, oh, but the candidates are bad. Well, that's why you have to be involved further down the process in the local government elections. I think this is something similar. This is something similar, where if they are further down, where they go at the senior superintendent rank and they select assistant commissioners of police, then they'll be looking at a wider pool at the start of where they are at on the ladder. And it might improve the level of candidates moving upwards, a trickle-up effect, so to speak. But then there was another thing that she said. There was another thing that she said that I found interesting. One of the issues is that, unlike the Police Complaints Authority, the Police Service Commission does not have investigative powers. Also, according to this Police Service Commission, the Commissioner sets the criteria with regards to what their objectives are. And by setting the objectives of what their job is supposed to be, then they will essentially have to assess the commissioner on objectives the commissioner sets. And they don't necessarily have the ability to do that. Now, with regards to that point, a former member of the Police Service Commission from before pointed out that's not how it's supposed to be. Right? Key performance indicators are supposed to be determined by the Service Commission with the commissioner, not by the commissioner by themselves, himself unto himself. I set my performance indicators for me, and then, well, I pass them, right? Whatever the results are, I pass them because I set them. That doesn't make any sense. And it's interesting that this iteration of the Police Service Commission decided to just let that go, apparently without any challenge. We don't know what was done behind the scenes, but obviously they did not do it publicly. So we only know so much with regards to their communication. But apparently this is not how it was done in the past, and changes were not necessarily made between then and now to say that the circumstances were different under a similar framework He said, no. We came up with the KPIs together because the Commissioner of Police will know policing better than us, that's fine, but we are still part of the process, the Service Commission, to come up with the KPIs, and therefore are part of the process to determine what are the benchmarks to assess the Commissioner. But then let's go back to the investigation, or lack of investigative powers. I wanna see if I could find the quote here. Unlike, for example, the Police Complaints Authority, the Commission is not vested with investigative powers. That's interesting. That's really interesting, because I recall back in 2021, the Prime Minister, essentially, I don't remember if the Service Commission publicly said it, but the Prime Minister publicly said it. The Police Service Commission hired retired Judge Stanley John to investigate the issuance of firearm user licenses. He said it wasn't him that did it. He was defending himself. He didn't do it. It was the Police Service Commission that did it. Now, that was the Service Commission that essentially blew up, and most of the members except the then chairman resigned in protest. Could this be what the protest was, or part thereof? Because the current commission is saying we don't have investigative powers, but yet, how do you get, what authority did the previous iteration have to give Stanley John the power to investigate not anything necessarily to do with their purview? Because it seems as though this firearm users license thing is like an internal affairs investigation. We want to find ongoing crimes. They weren't investigating the Commissioner of Police at the time. By their admission, that's what was publicly stated. We're not investigating anybody. We're investigating an issue. But the Police Service Commissions, I believe their primary roles is not to deal with firearm users licenses. It's to deal with hiring and firing and assessing the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioners of Police. So obviously, if you're investigating an issue that isn't directly related to that, it's indirectly related to that. Did the Police Service Commission even have the authority to do that in the sense of, is there investigating firearm users license within their purview? And then, again, let's go with what the outgoing chairman said. It is imperative that if the Commission is to achieve its constitutional remit, that it be provided with the means of independently verifying and investigating the efficiency and effectiveness of officers under its purview. Well, apparently, this Service Commission was made under a different set of rules and regulations. Were there changes made that I'm not aware of? Somebody please tell me. I don't understand. How come your predecessor was able to cause a whole brouhaha? And let's not forget, again, I have no idea whose job it would be, except maybe the Commissioner of Police, to investigate any breaches in the legislation that says that the list must, that the President receives the list and sends the list, not receives the list, assesses the list, and sends it back if necessary. So there's that. I still haven't gotten over that, as much as some people might wish for me to do so. But it's interesting. I agree with the outgoing chairman. The Police Service Commission probably needs to be improved. The legislation around it, its powers and authority, its ability needs to be improved. It should have an investigative ability. It should. It's just that, you know, you can't unring the bell. Apparently, somehow it did. But was it supposed to have it then? And what does that mean about the Stanley John report now? And maybe is that why the status is kind of in a no man's land, and that's why we have yet to hear anything more about that? Don't mind that we're now a year away from local government elections, and the Prime Minister on the campaign trail said, soon as it's done, you will know more. And the night of I asked him, and he said, it's before the courts, I can't say nothing. And now the issue, they are mum on it, they haven't spoken about it, it's gone, it's buried. just like local government reform, just like procurement regulation, well, to some extent, property tax, because they're telling us to pay, but they haven't actually fully implemented everything that's necessary to implement it. And the Tobago autonomy bills, don't get me started. What we get are election promises, an incomplete implementation, or none at all. So, will the Service Commission be improved? I don't know, because they like it so. I mean, the Service Commission is trying to say, don't blame us for the state of policing. We don't fight crime. Yeah, but you picked the commissioner. And maybe the criteria was that bad, but to some extent, even with a limited pool, I think most people in this country, I could be wrong, would argue, yeah, but even with a limited pool, you could have taken a chance on somebody else. And not just extend someone to the point where you can't extend them anymore. Their term of office was, what, 2 to 3 years? That was about as effective as putting an actual lame duck in the office. All right, let's take a break. Hopefully the ASP is here. We'll switch gears. Stay tuned. This is Dr. Man on WSND Content Capital. We'll be right back after this.
This holiday season, bring the magic of Christmas home with WESN's Joy of Christmas. Relive timeless classics from the laughter to the heartwarming moments that make the season unforgettable.
Hey, 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 light the lamp, not the rat, light the lamp, not the rat!
Santa's coming to town! Santa! Oh my God!
Oh, poor baby.
Experience the joy of WESN special productions, crafted to bring you new stories and cherished memories. This year, let WESN bring the joy of Christmas to your home.
Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown!
Catch the spirit, catch the joy.
Anchors away. May the force be with you.
Only on WESN, your content capital.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process, that we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next to Seth. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have 2 of the 3 species of anteaters right here.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
And I am back in studio, so of course, ASP Ashraf Ali is with me back in studio. Good morning, sir. It's good to see you face to face and not to have to see you through a screen.
Well, it's good to be here. It's good to be here, and it's always a pleasure to be on WCN.
Now, one of the things I just want to touch on first before we get into the actual topic, I read a report, I just glanced over it, that highlighted, and this is one of the things that I do like to bring up. This also happened during the pandemic. Well, there was a report, I believe it was today, pointing to the fact that 7 officers so far have been killed for this year. And it's an unfortunate situation. Despite whatever we think of the police, these are lives being lost. And in some cases, shockingly, not necessarily in the line of duty, but they could be direct attacks. Now, is it because they were police officers or just as in the capacity as citizens? We don't know. And then, of course, some officers would have also been attacked in the line of duty this year. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where I do wonder, is this a harsh reality that some officers have to face now? Because I don't necessarily think Trinidad and Tobago was quite like certain jurisdictions. Like when you had the bank robbery in LA back in the 90s that caused the entire police service in North America essentially to be upgunned because they had to raid but they had to get guns from a gun store in order to fight back with those 2 armored gunmen. I don't know if we're going to necessarily get there yet, but I hate to say it yet, but the level of violence is affecting the police service now. It's just one of those things where it's hitting home further.
It has been hitting home for a while. Unfortunately, yes, we have lost a number of officers to violence at the same, just like the rest of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. It's not directed. There's no evidence to suggest it was directed towards the organization as a whole, but it's just that the victims were members of the organization. And it just highlights that all of us could be victims at some point in time.
Yeah.
And that just kind of brings to the fore as we start this conversation is that on the 19th is International Men's Day. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has a greater number of men in the organization, but at the same time, they are not considered as any value as to the holistically how we value men. We believe men just have to be, men are men and men don't have no issues, men have no challenges, men have to be tough.
Men don't cry.
Yes, all of that, right? But over the years, we have realized that men do in fact have similar challenges just like everybody else, right? Just like our female counterparts. We have financial issues, we have psychological issues, we have emotional issues, we have family issues, work-related issues. Gender-based violence is prominent. Physical, sexual abuse, as over the years we have seen it. You will be surprised to have men who are going through financial abuse in their space. It have men who had sexual harassment issues, but we don't feel a need to come out and speak about it, and that pent-up challenges sometimes is exacerbated, and you realize that men are the ones that are always on the receiving end of violence.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I think that's one of the. There are a couple of categories worldwide where men, not so great categories where men are in the lead. Everyone will say, well, men are in charge. Yeah, but men also kind of get the bad end of the stick with regards to certain jobs, with regards to not just being the perpetrators of violent crime, but being the victims of violent crime, particularly in TNT.
Yes.
The majority of murder victims are males. Of course, the majority of people that sign up or volunteer for things like police or defense would be men, which means that, you know, have to face the situation. But then also in our society where we are trying to modernize our views and get away from old-fashioned, not the good old-time ways, but old-fashioned thinking about male and female roles in society with regards to things like gender-based violence and domestic abuse and stuff like that. But there's also, ironically, stigmas attached to it. So while we have to try to treat, because there are issues that victimize women that we have to kind of bring into the modern sphere, but there are also issues for men, and it seems as though like it's less valued or less talked about. Even now, when we have spoken about it for quite some time, it has been acknowledged to some extent, but you don't necessarily always see that play out in society, because I still think for a man to walk into a police station or to some sort of mental health hotline or abuse hotline and say, I am a victim of some kind of domestic abuse, I don't know, like, for him to go to his friends and say, hey, my wife abusing me, and for them not to laugh at him initially, that is probably impractical.
However, we have to look at it from a different perspective. He is a stronger individual than the average person. You realize that. For him to come out and say, to understand, to go against the entire tide.
So the ones who are willing to speak,
as
opposed to not speaking.
I would say that those individuals are stronger than the average, right? Because he is going against the normal societal tide as to what constitutes a man and how a man is supposed to operate and behave. And he is coming out, he's coming out and saying that I have been a victim. That takes a lot. It takes more strength than bottling up it inside and exploding at some point in time.
Right, exploding.
Asking for help takes a lot.
Because, of course, I think there's that famous Michael Douglas movie, I think it's One Bad Day, and it's been in stories before when the mild-mannered character just has a psychological break and all of a sudden turns violent. Some of the mass killings around the world could be attributed maybe to things like that, not all, obviously. And in TNT, of course, we just spoke about suicide.
Yes, yes. And so in Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, we recognize that. And this week, in recognition of International Men's Day, we have a number of activities taking place by different divisions, sections, and branches to treat men, or acknowledge, I wouldn't say treat, but acknowledge that men do have issues, and we have some programs running. The police hospital, we have a men care, men health program. Into come in, you get your all your blood checks from health checks, free diagnosis, free to go in. We have the traffic and highway patrol branch doing a fitness fitness thing. You know, all police officers just come in, just do a fitness, just understand your level of fitness, because fitness is also important. Important part of it, as well as all the divisions and branches and sections throughout this week will be doing things to just acknowledge men in the context of police officers per se, police officers in the organization, because even though we work with each other, we don't recognize that some of the persons that we work together are men who face issues just like everybody else.
Yeah, that's one thing. I think it seems as though it's easier for women to have a sisterhood, almost natural, to open up to each other. Yes, of course, when women have their issues and they're fighting, it could be quite vicious as well, right? Where with verbal and emotional. But the point is, they're more willing to speak, whether for good or ill, and to connect and to find connection, right? Whereas with men, that tendency to bottle it up,
yes,
right, and to hide everything.
So we're doing something different in that we acknowledge that men socialize differently. Let's be real. We socialize differently. There are certain things that we would like, right? We may even, in going forward in the organization, we may want to bring in some other aspects of socialization and benefits, or pampering, I should say, men to get certain types of pampering, psychological, physical, as everything else. But for we as men, we socialize differently. So we bringing that into the organization, into that, sitting down and playing a little cards or food, just lying with some friends and just all talking, just de-stressing, having a little fun with each other, socializing, talking to each other. That gives you an opportunity to de-stress in some aspects of it. The organization recognizing doing cooking something with each other, and we just sit down and we eat, playing football, playing sports together, doing activities together as men, even though sometimes it might be competitive with any men's spirit, right? But it shows that you're still recognizing men, and men have value. And sometimes we fail to realize that men have their role, and a very critical role in society, and we keep, over the years, we just keep eroding that and believe that we are not, how we portray men is that they're insignificant in some aspects of it, and they're always on the negative aspect of receiving everything. But at the end of the day, whether history and everything, we have been there with women over the years. Yes, women is getting a lot more pushed to the front because they have been treated negatively over the years. But with that, are we now going to neglect the men?
Right, by trying to address one side of the equation.
You are neglecting the other side of it. And we don't want that in society.
Well, because, I guess part of it is certain roles for men in society way back in history. They're not necessarily pertinent now. We don't necessarily need a vast majority of men to be fighting in wars. Trinidad and Tobago is not participating in wars in the last 60 years, right? We don't need a significant amount of the population to go out and hunt. Right? We have solved agriculture to the point where physical labor and things like agriculture, mass labor, are not necessarily needed like what it was. Right? So one of the things a male's role in societies throughout history have been to undertake certain physically demanding challenges like that. They're not as pertinent anymore. This is 2024. It's a new world. And I believe this is one of the things is positive male role models. And I do wonder if part of the neglect is maybe we don't have the positive male role models. And we see that now in part with regards to the violence in schools, with regards to young men being enticed into crime. Part of the positive role models is not just to be an example, but also to be there, so they're not alone. When you want to say no to the gang, it's all credit to those who could do so by themselves. But if they don't have strong men in their life to kind of support them and help them, it just makes it easier for the gangs to prey on them. And I think we've seen too many people who try to deny the gang and killed.
Even in the aspect of the gang or criminal life, we talk, if we put the gang and criminal life aside, even in the average home, right? No criminal activities. The average home, men are missing in some of the average homes.
Yeah.
It's not no criminal aspects of it. They're just missing in some of the homes. The role model, they may even be men in homes who are not proper role model in the home and the home itself. So it is not about the criminal aspect of it, but men as a whole, we are losing our value in terms of putting what the role model is.
I think single fathers, there's a single father association.
Yes.
And I know it's not just a space for men to hate on women. I know of
they have been doing a lot. They have been doing a lot of good work and bringing forward
that local
some of the issues surrounding single fathers, because the single fathers really and truly have challenges like just everybody else.
And the stigma to males affects them and their positions. A lot of it is fathers' rights. Ironically, at a time when, around the world there's lamentation that their fathers that are not there for their kids, there's an organization that's representing fathers who do want to be there for their kids, and they have a whole host of difficulties. And their work has been acknowledged by psychologists and therapists and sociologists in the country. So this is not like a fly-by-night kind of wacky organization.
No, so and the significance of International Men's Day is to acknowledge men, acknowledge the value, what they have contributed to society and what they continue to contribute to society. Like everything else, we'll always have a negative aspect of it, but we should never be dwelling on the negative aspect of it, but always dwell on the positive and going forward. And the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is trying our best to portray that, because when you deal with a police officer, he's a man.
Mm-hmm.
He's a man that he's a brother, he's a father, he's an uncle. Some of them might be grandparents. He might be a friend, a husband. He is there. He's a male figure, and he has his stresses and he has all the challenges, just like the average individual male. And we have persons on the extreme spectrum, but I'm talking about the average.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, he is held at a different standard because of the position of the law enforcement officer that he holds.
Mm-hmm.
So he's held at a different standard. He's expected to behave in a different manner. He's expected to operate in a different perspective within the law, I would say. But when it comes out of the context of a law, being a human being, facing all these challenges at the same time, and being a man at the same time, it is a lot for a number of persons, especially if they have underlying issues or some traumas that they have gone through in their young life that have never resolved. We all have all kind of things in our closets that never came out. We all have some challenges that we are going through. In our own space, we have challenges that we are going through, but we expect to portray a different image when you come outside as a man, because you have to be strong, you have to come outside here. And I can't cry, because if I cry, I'm too soft. If I get angry, then you're angry man.
Right. But it's not about being weak.
No, it is not. It is
right?
not.
Because at the end of the day, look, to some extent, a significant amount of holding security and defending society will come down just because of the statistics, the demographics of the service. Right? It'll come down to men. It's not about being weak. It's not about, we have to be in touch with our emotional side and let's use kid gloves to deal with criminals. No. But the point is, for a police officer to draw his weapon and to fire it off, yes, all kinds of other things could be considered when those things happen, right? But all things being equal, let's just assume that it's a reasonable action that the officer is taking. It's still a traumatic event for the officer. It's not as though every police officer, has killed somebody, once a year or something like that. Most police officers don't just fire their gun outside of training just so multiple times and have multiple gunfights and have potentially killed multiple people. Most police officers don't do that.
No.
These events are still emotionally heightened, and it's not something that's easily processed. That's why so many veterans from war zones come back, and we fortunately don't have to go through that, but we have it at least in a small scale given the level of violence, and our police service has to be involved.
And when you look at it from in society, the men in the police service try their best to be the best role model that they can be for their families and in society, notwithstanding some of the negatives that we have, right? So
yes, we'll acknowledge their bad apples.
We are acknowledging bad apples across the board, but today is not about acknowledging bad apples or bringing out the bad apples. It's about the positive attributes of men and how they have developed Trinidad and Tobago. From our prime ministers come all the way down, right? this is not, we have strong men in our organization and in Trinidad and Tobago that are positive role models. But do we look at those individuals as the positive role models, or do we see them as an individual, or look at the personalities alone and say, because of that person, I don't like that person? But when you look at the attributes of that individual, it's a positive role model that you could say that we could emulate, and the youths could emulate to be that person. But we don't have. Sometimes you just want to be like your dad.
Yeah.
And that is good enough, because a young man wants to be like his dad, because he sees his dad as his positive role model. And if you understand that, you have to continue being that positive role model for your child.
Yeah.
Right? And that is what our society has to endeavor to go to, not to reach a stage where we have to worry about whether or not we have sufficient firearms to treat with criminal elements because it may be overpowered. That is where we don't even want to go.
But then also, just like, yes, every son wants to emulate their dad. Every son also wants to have, I guess, the emotional connection to a mother, but every daughter wants to have a similar emotional connection to a father.
Yes.
And that's something as well to be considered. And I guess to close the topic, this is not International Men's Day. It's not well, it's our day.
No,
so
it's not
women
about
need to take a step back, right? And they need to kick them to the side. No, it's not about that, because as you said, to some extent, perhaps men are being undervalued in the process of trying to address issues that have been victimizing women. So International Women's Day should not be about reversing the process and then going right back to the beginning of maybe, victimizing women all over again for the sake of International Women's Day. It's not about that. It's I guess, one of the things coming out of these days should be, listen, we have to figure out how to treat with both genders respectfully and to acknowledge the challenges of both genders. Today is just the Men's Day to acknowledge the men, but you don't kind of like downplay or suppress women just to have a day.
Exactly. So this week, I guess, we will have a lot of activities taking place within the organization.
Right.
And we are hopeful that all the officers in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service get involved in it, take the opportunity to be part of the International Men's Day, and do some introspection at the same time, and see whether or not you are the best version of a man that you can be, and improve going forward, right? Because we all know we all have flaws, just like everybody else. We have flaws. Some things that you need to work on to improve, right? And this is just an opportunity for us to acknowledge, everybody to acknowledge men. We have a day too, right? We have a day too, a day to be pampered, to be considered, to be thought of as men. And in the word men, when I say the word men, in the context of what men means and what a man brings to the table, and what the value of a man in society.
I think also it's a day to point out to younger men, like, all right, now we have this day. What does it mean to be a man? And I guess it's one of those things where perhaps that has stagnated.
Yes.
As opposed to moving and progressing with the times to fit in and to be more effective in the times. And the indicators of that is things are not always working. And that's why men who want to hold it inside and deal with it on their own, and that might have worked for older generations, but maybe now life is too complicated.
So true.
So new tools need to be developed. But also, I think in societies, we've kind of lost sight of the important core parts of what it means to be a man. It's not about swinging axes and hunting animals and going to war, but like some of the core psychological, to be a man, to be strong, not necessarily to be weak, but still to have understanding, right? And, once you lose that with their understanding, a lot of things just kind of fall apart.
Yeah.
So, folks, we'll take a very quick break. When we come back, we open up the phone lines, and we can hear from you. You could call it International Men's Day. It's tomorrow, but we could call and speak about it today. Of course, there's other news about the police in the press, yes, you could call in and ask ASPLE. He will try to answer you as best as he can. And of course, there are other stories that you could call in to speak about as well. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN, Content Capital. We'll be right back after this.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry, "Uncle." They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
And we're back on Talking for the WESN. It's always good to have my budding co-host, ASPLE. That's a joke because of a comment that was made. I don't know if it went out on air, but off air, I assume. So don't read anything more than that. It's just a joke. It's just sarcasm. But someone who also brings a little bit of sarcasm on serious topics. We have our first caller, Digger Martin, on the line. Welcome back, caller.
Good morning, Mr. Small, and your budding co-host.
It was a joke. It was a joke. Let's not roll with it. I regret it already.
Are you hearing me?
Go ahead, Digger Martin.
Hello?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Morning.
Yeah, we're hearing you.
I'm not hearing you. It looks like the line has gone again.
We're hearing you. We're hearing you. We're hearing you, caller. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you. Can you hear me?
Okay. I'll call back. Something has gone wrong with the line.
Oh, boy. Not too sure what happened there. That's a new one. That's a new one. Could be a setting, but I don't know. Could be the phone line. You can never tell what the current state of
true,
it.
yeah.
Well, with that said, it was just a joke, folks. It's just a joke. Let's not get the ASP into any sort
trouble.
of any sort of trouble. That is always one of the interesting things. Maybe I could just ask you this, because we were speaking about it while we wait for maybe Digger Martin another call to call back. Because I was thinking, well, why do you have to increase the Service Commission's authority on who they hire and fire? I brought up to you, why can't they just go down the ranks if the current pool is bad and go to maybe a senior super commissioner? But you, I think, were cautioning that might open up a can of worms to bypass people.
No. Digger Martin, come back again.
As I ask the question, it always happens. Digger Martin, good morning. Digger Martin?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Good morning. I
morning.
hope we didn't play the song again, a song of silence, because I wasn't hearing you and I have to call back. Are you hearing me?
We are hearing you.
Okay, we having problems. I'm not hearing you all at all. But I could still make my contribution, and there will be no interaction. I'm hoping you're hearing, and I wanted to basically said, okay, we are asking to celebrate International Men's, but we may have continued to do something that is unsavory, abuse women, and are going to link it to the political fraternity. Right now we have an Auditor General, I believe, is being abused with the hierarchy of the leadership of this country. And I'm going to juxtapose it with another very intelligent lady where I believe similar sort of protocol. And she, at that point in time, she was the Speaker of the House. And she was Miss Okas. She was she was an attorney. She was another very bright. And the leadership of the time wanted to get two strategy. One was she wanted to disrupt in government by suspending some of the parliamentary MPs or the ministers. But one thing that is and has not been surfaced was the real agenda. And how a court case that they say she was complicit in to root her out. And that was the genesis of the state of emergency. And I suspect they want to move another strong woman. And they are putting something into the public domain to distract us from the real issue, where this $3 billion gone. We haven't anything come back to us, me as a taxpayer, to understand where that money has gone. It is left in the sky for we to interpret, basically say all sorts of things. But I want no more of that. And I'm going to ask the TTPS representative there. There are two issues. The Privy Council said investigate a finance minister. But it have a front page issue now with WASA, where a judge say there is potential misbehavior in public office with respect to an issue. And I'm calling it the Dan in the Van issue, where a minister made a complaint about an employee in a particular appears from the investigation at what something is awry with that perverting the course of justice. And if the police will intervene into that. And at the same time, I want to castigate for spending money to try to pervert the course of justice, and at the same time spend his.
All right. We're going to have to cut the call off because we're not able to communicate with him, so I apologize. He was breaking up, and we have another caller waiting, so I wasn't able to convey that to the caller to wrap up. So I really apologize. We did get what you got with the two issues. We couldn't go any further, but you were breaking up, so it was difficult to follow. And I did get your comments on the Auditor General. But before we respond to that, we have San Fernando, I think, on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Hello.
Caller, good morning.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Could I be called? Hello. Yeah,
Caller, can you hear me? Can you hear me, caller?
Hello.
You calling again?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me, caller?
I'm loud. I ain't hearing nothing.
All right, we seem to be having some technical issues here with regards to audio, that it might not be phone connections. It might be on our end, given that it's the second caller now that had the issue. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this was where the first caller was going. Hopefully, we could get it sorted out, maybe get one more caller in or get that last caller back. But I think he was alluding to the fact that, of course, the Privy Council question with the terms of reference on the investigation, why wasn't the Minister of Finance included? Or there was a situation in WASA where a Freedom of Information Act that alludes to maybe corruption and stuff was settled in the court. Now, I do want to ask the police, how is there a unit to deal with things like if a minister does?
It's not a unit per se.
Right.
Decisions or inferences that or certain things that comes out of judicial matters and not investigated by the police because it's not a matter to be investigated as yet. Somebody has to recommend. So if it is, for instance...
Recommend or make an accusation? No.
When I say recommend or report it to the organization that they needs to have further investigation into this matter. So a matter before the court, and the judges or the magistrate makes a certain inference or observe certain things, they can give the prosecutor some some directives and say, listen, this needs further X, Y, and Z. It does not mean that charges could be laid, but there is some areas that are of concern
to investigate.
So we could have. So it has to be forwarded to the organization, the TTPS, and then it will have to be
from
investigated.
An official source, not from a man on the street.
No, it cannot be. If a man on the street have to go to the station and make a report just like normal.
Okay.
So
let's try and see if we could get Shagonis on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on there. Caller, good morning.
Hello, gentlemen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning. If you can't, just go ahead.
I was looking at the Salaries Reviews Commission recommendation. Salaries Review Commission. And it is not surprising to me because their history has been dealing this way, satisfying the politicians rather than doing the best for the country. One of the principles that they came up with is they should look at where the government was getting problems to fill posts, to raise the inquiry. And in my division, where at the professional level, we had a commissioner, 4 assistant commissioner, a 9 valuers. At the recruitment level of the professionals, we reached a position where the whole 9 valuer posts was vacant, and they would not raise the salary to attract them. Even with, bear in mind that politicians did not used to get paid long ago. They used to work to give back to the country, and the best people were selected. Today, we obviously do not have that. And this is one of the major problems. I also read in this morning papers that the police was afraid to patrol some areas, especially at night. Now, I have given to you on a number of occasions the reason for this, which started in East Dry River, and up to now, what is causing the problem is the old derelict building, which were paid for, compensation was collected, and they sit down jail. I don't know if you have any questions, gentlemen.
I'm not sure if you can hear me normally, so I won't try to have a conversation.
Thank you. I realize you can't communicate. Bye.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. I know you were hearing through TV, but that won't be practical to try to have a conversation through television with the delay. I'm not entirely sure of the story that he was referencing.
There were some issues, or some persons were indicating that officers don't like to go on patrol in certain areas at certain times. Let's be practical. It has certain areas that it's a bit risky at the same time in patrolling and driving a vehicle in an area, right, that 2 persons alone, 2 officers alone, right? So when you patrol, you will want to have at least a minimum of 4 officers to lend assistance to each other in certain areas. It's not that the officers don't patrol those areas, but when you look at some of the increased presence on a regular basis, it is not realistic in those areas because it's not mobile patrol alone. It's foot patrol in certain areas you have to go because they cannot drive in those areas because of the locations. So I don't think there is any challenge with the officers patrolling, whether by foot or by mobile patrol in particular areas.
I mean, I would give a pushback. This could just be a way to express or maybe an observation that might be tied to a more underlying problem where you have bad apples.
Yes.
So there are those officers who patrol and those officers who want to ride a desk. We don't have any more vehicles. You know, that is a common complaint, unfortunately, on the service. And as you're well aware, it doesn't help the public perception.
No, it does not.
So we're going to try with St. James. Good morning, caller. You're on the air? Caller, good morning. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Can you hear me? I don't think the caller can hear me. Caller, if you're following on the TV, you could go ahead and make a contribution.
All right, okay. Good morning to the panel there. I have a question for the officer. One, what is it really necessary after those police reports on the media? Whether it is really necessary to identify all those officers and by names involved, superintendent this, inspector that, and is that really necessary in the report? Question two, Sean might be able to answer it. The SRC means the Salaries Review Commission. Now, are they really reviewing the job to really look at the reimbursement of the job that these people are doing? In fact, they're not performing, but the salary is increasing. I mean, I find that the salary should go down. That don't make sense. Bye.
Thank you, caller. For the first thing, I would just say, no, I believe what they're doing, and this came out last year as well. They're looking at the office. It's not Keith Rowley, Prime Minister, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, opposition leader, whatever minister, whatever MP. It is the seat of the office of the Prime Minister, opposition leader, MP for whichever constituency, minister of whichever ministry. So they're looking at that. They're probably doing a couple of things and comparing it to other governments in other countries and the level of responsibility. I think Jamaica, in terms of total dollars, when you compare it and convert it to TT dollars for comparison, technically, actual numbers, they're paid more than our prime minister, ministers, et cetera, right? Now, that's not necessarily because different jurisdictions, standards of living, cost of living, you know, that's still not it is. But my point is, they're looking at what it potentially should be, regardless of who is in office. And I would argue for something like the prime minister, opposition leader, what have you, it's not to reduce the pay, but rather to reduce the office, to replace the office holder. Right? Now, are they doing a good job in how they do the review and come up to those figures? That's a whole other kettle of fish. I don't know what the math is. I think one stakeholder did ask that question. What is the criteria by which they determine what these raises are supposed to be? I don't know what it is. I think that's a moot point, though. It would be poor leadership for them to accept those raises. Now, with regards to the police question, if it's not clear, usually when you get a report in the radio, the newspaper, like so-and-so investigated with the help of so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. So now in the newspaper, it might not be so bad, but certain stories, certain shorter forms like radio stories, even our news on the hour, that might at times be included because it's part of the report, it's part of what information is there. Usually when there's a crime report, it's not like we have all of the details, right? Obviously.
Yeah, so they would normally share specific type, like who is leading the investigation, who
because this might be part of the police media press release.
Media press release. So it falls in line with some of the information in the media press release. Sometimes persons believe that, but if you're part of an ongoing exercise or an ongoing thing, and you are investigator and you have laid a charge before the person, before the court, your name is present because that becomes part of public information,
public record,
public records. So I think what the caller is alluding to is some of the information that we see circulating on social media that is much more heavy heavily weighted in information as opposed to what comes out of corporate communication, because social media is also causing some problems. And then we have a lot of independent persons who are involved in media, right? Not the mainstream media, but everybody is considered to be media on social media right now.
Basically, yes.
Right, so a lot of different information coming, and a lot more information that is not sanitized in terms of our corporate communication release from the organization. So it's two different things that we're looking at right now.
Just want to point out, yes, sometimes when someone says to sanitize information, there's a lot of bad faith implications there. But there's also the need to, when dealing with sensitive topics, to sanitize information in order to prevent problems. That's the unfortunate reality of a lot of government business and even some private business, right? So you have to kind of be ready to be flexible, not flexible, but to have the capacity to...
Because we do sanitize in the context that if there's minors involved...
Right, that's one way you do it, yeah.
Victims of...
Keep those names out.
Yeah, so there's some victims of domestics.
If there was a witness,
yes.
You're not going to mention any witness name.
You have to sanitize it to make sure that when you're sending information to the public domain, these individuals are safeguarded.
The irony is, this is an area where we're getting transparency. We have the names of the officers involved. I don't know if for all investigations, but in theory, for most apparently.
Yeah.
And I mean, this might be a kettle of fish, but the point is the names are out there. So technically these things could be tracked. It's part of the public record, as you said. So if there was an officer that maybe had a lot of negative public interactions and the name is out there for certain investigations, technically media watchdog groups could have a better chance to track it. So it's a detail that I'm hesitant to kind of say we shouldn't have or utilize, because I think I've been asking for more transparency.
It has its pros and cons. We have to weigh, at the end of the day, you have to weigh them, which one outweighs the other. But it has its pros and cons.
Because, especially for high-profile cases, you want these names because potentially these are the people who might be in line to become the next commissioner. These are the people who are handling some of the most sensitive cases. It could be some of the most sensitive and brutal murders or sexual abuse victims or political corruption scandals, right? So some of these, the names of the investigator is just as important. Now in the States, you might actually get a whole press conference with these people. So you'll have name, face, you know what they sound like, you get a feel for them. We just get the name. We don't even necessarily get a photo, but at least it's still something, right? So now, I guess it's how society utilizes it, responsibly or not. That's the thing, and I think that's the only thing that the caller was alluding to. Maybe for every little robbery and this and that, we don't need the superintendent and corporal and the PCs. Like, we don't necessarily like 6 officers' names because they got one guy that stole a chubby, right? But if it was like a murder or something, then maybe put out the lead investigator or a senior or whatever.
That has been a concern for us at the same time, because we have seen a lot of information out there and we question whether or not how it reached that location. But you realize social media has a lot of breaches.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm all for more transparency, so I am not going to knock anyone that gives out accurate information. Inaccurate information and speculation, be careful with that. You folks on social media, you'll get yourself in trouble. Eventually, laws will close all the social media loopholes. Just wait. With that said, we unfortunately are out of time, so we have to close the loophole of going any later. So, ASP, thank you for joining me.
Yes, and Sean, and I want to say to all the WSN
gentlemen,
men out there, and all the callers and all the supporters of WSN, it has been a pleasure to be here. Right, today is my official, or the last of my official day as a media ambassador for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. I will be proceeding on my vacation leave shortly, so it has been a pleasure to be in here and to be part of the WSN family. So thank you very much, Sean. It has been a pleasure.
The final day for the media ambassador.
As,
But,
as a representative of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
But, maybe not the final day of Ashraf Ali. It was a joke, but sometimes jokes become reality. Hopefully you don't get in trouble for that statement. Thank you for all of the callers as well. I apologize for the issues where you could not hear us. Hopefully we'll have that sorted out for tomorrow. And with that said, folks, enjoy International Men's Day tomorrow. In case I forget to bring it up, take time to show some appreciation to your husbands, to your fathers, sons, brothers, uncles, all of the men in your life, friends, neighbors, teachers.
And police officers.
And police. I was going to say it. You're retired. You're retiring. Stay retired. Now, folks, make today a good day. As Mr. Shaw would always say, remember your allegiance to each other and to the Republic. And always, in everyday life, consider that it's nice to be nice. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.